On today's show, Tyler Jones is back for part 2 of 2 as we talk about an entirely massive summer for the Atlanta Hawks, and we'll get into that right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1718 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday here in mid-May. And today's show is sponsored by the folks at LinkedIn Jobs. Help you find the most qualified candidates that you want to talk to and help you to do it faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. Terms and conditions apply. I also want to encourage you to stop with the podcast, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out on Spotify or Apple. We're also on YouTube. And again, make us your first listen and tell a friend about the podcast today. This is also part 2 of 2 with my friend Tyler Jones joining the podcast. Always a fan favorite and fun to talk to Tyler. But if you missed part 1, I recommend you starting with that. It should be available in your podcast feed of choice right now. So without any further delay, let's dive back in, I should say, with my friend Tyler Jones. And we're doing that right now. I do want to get to Alex Sarr, but you mentioned Brandon Ingram. So do you want to do a jag on that? Because I think that's a talking point. I did a segment on it a couple of weeks ago on the show, basically talking through what Ingram is in broad terms, talking about, because I do think that if a deal happened, it would probably be some version of DeJounte for Ingram with other stuff. Yep. There are ways to do it without DeJounte, but I think there would be no incentive for the Hawks to have a team with DeJounte and Ingram on it. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
That doesn't make sense.
Just basketball, they're both good players, but just the way those games fit doesn't make sense. So he's been, and I want to stress, no one has reported the Hawks are interested in Brandon Ingram. No one has reported that. It's just a logical rumor or logical rumbling or idea.
It's one of those things where everybody who follows the league or is not necessarily even an insider, but who writes about the league, or analysts look at the Hawks roster, looks at the Pelicans roster, and they're a natural trade partner.
And they did talk in February. They did talk about DeJounte back in February. That did happen. It wasn't for Ingram back then.
Yeah.
And Will Guillory, I think, did a podcast. I think it was with Hoopside and Mike Scotto. Will Guillory covers the Pelicans, and they talked about the Hawks as a logical team. It wasn't like Will reporting it. It was like, keep an eye on the Hawks kind of thing, which makes sense because the Pelicans clearly have some interest in DeJounte. The Hawks might have interest in Brandon Ingram if it was for DeJounte at this point. And the Pelicans, this is a very open secret, probably need to trade Brandon Ingram just because he doesn't work there. Like their whole package, him and Zion have never been the best fit together. He's about to be expiring contract, and they don't want to necessarily give him the max, which I think he wants the max. That's a different discussion altogether. But are you interested in Brandon Ingram as the Hawks in your place as resident ombudsman?
It's one of those things where I keep coming back. It's like beggars can't be choosers, and this goes back. This goes back. I don't know if we talked about this yet, but trade is looming. Trade looms over all of this, and to me,
yep.
I heard Lou Williams and Jeff Teague. Not saying they talked to Trae Young.
Hawks legends.
They did play with Trae. They are both Hawks legends, and they did both play with Trae Young, in their careers. They did say they need to trade the number 1 pick for a star. Now, this is where we've basically talked about was like that trade's not available.
It's easy to say that if you're just casually talking about it, which is why
exactly where it's like yeah, it makes sense. Like, yeah, you got to trade the one to get they were like, throwing names, and it's like, well, that guy is probably not available. Or it's like, you trade one for Mikal Bridges. I'm like, I don't know if the Hawks even need to do that to get Mikal Bridges. And Mikal's not been that good.
Well, there's a tier of guy. In fact, Ingram's in this tier too. There's a tier of guy who, I can see why you would think number 1 pick for Ingram.
Yeah, where it's like,
but given what the Hawks have to do that money-wise, and I don't think those guys are that – I mean, they're really good players, but I think Ingram and Bridges are like the 40th best player in the league. Not top 20 guys. They're like in the tier – honestly, they're in the tier that DeJounte is in. And I don't mean that in a negative way.
It's not a pejorative.
They fit better than DeJounte does with Trey. I would argue each of them would, but we've kind of seen not that I shouldn't say that. I think what you don't want to do is give up, because I think practically in a situation you're probably trading in some form DeJounte and the number 1 overall pick, not necessarily in the same trade, but if you're trading for Brandon Ingram, we just talked about this. You don't need DeJounte. He doesn't do and Trey. Trey, DeJounte, and Brandon Ingram don't make sense together.
Nope.
Period, point blank. So like it's a bigger overhaul. And if you end up at the end of the day, you've spent DeJounte and the number 1 overall pick in terms of asset capital, and you end up with your second best player being Brandon Ingram.
Brandon Ingram is a rough sell. Like that is you can't sell that. There's no way you're going to be able to sell that to your fans, ownership.
I mean, you can,
and you can't sell it to your basketball people.
Well, that's what what I would say is, I think we agree on this. But you can correct me if I'm wrong. I do think there is a real rationale for not necessarily buying low on Brandon Ingram, but like buying at an appropriate price of Brandon Ingram, still having the number 1 overall pick, using that pick on Alex Sarr or somebody else that you like, and have, Brandon Ingram would be your second best player when he arrives, but the hope would be Jalen becomes your second best player or becomes your best player, or whatever it is. And then you also have this lottery bet on Sarr or Holland or whoever you want to say it is as another upside guy. And then, dream world in a couple years, maybe you have 4 premium guys at that point. Maybe you have Trey, Ingram, Jalen, and your number 1 overall pick who's become, I don't think Alex Sarr is going to be a super duper star, but top 50 player in the league. If you have 4 of the top 50 guys in the league, now you're talking, now you're cooking with gas. You know what I mean? Does that all make sense? It's like 5 steps ahead of time, but it's different.
I just want to, probably the closest analog to Brandon Ingram's trade market, considering he's expiring, looking for big money.
1 year left.
Probably Pascal Siakam, right?
Yeah. A familiar Hawks target from a year ago.
And he's not as good as Pascal.
I think Pascal was certainly viewed at maybe a half tier up from Ingram.
Primarily because Brandon Ingram doesn't play basketball games. Like he doesn't reach the 65 mark. Let's just put this out there.
I had the stat. I don't want to forget it. I'll pull it up now. I think he's only played more than 60. Yeah, 64 games is his high since his rookie year. He played 79 games in LA in a bench role. Ever since then, this is his games played by year. 59, 52, 62, 61, 55, 45, 64 this year. So it isn't like he's never playing, but you got to pencil him in for 60. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, where you're hiring for a small business and want to find quality professionals that are right for the roles that you have available. And that's why check out the folks at LinkedIn Jobs. They have the tools to find the right professionals for your team. They help you to do it faster, and they help you to do it for free. I've been hiring people for a long time, my day job, and really it's been huge, making the entire process easier for me and much more efficient. They know that small businesses are often wearing a ton of different hats. They might have the time and resources that you need to perfectly hire someone. And LinkedIn knows not just another job board, they have a network of more than 1 billion professionals. That makes it the most possible place to find someone to hire, gives you access to professionals that you can't find anywhere else. And they do it all, making the process easy and intuitive for you. Hiring is much easier when you have that many quality candidates available to you. It's so easy, in fact, that 86% of available businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. They're also finding ways to make the process easier for you. And 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn Jobs for the hiring of their employees. Post your job for free by going to linkedin.com/lockedonnba. One more time, that is linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Terms and conditions apply.
And if you're doing that and you're the Hawks, you're like, I mean, Pascal's an every down play. Like Pascal plays every game. He plays 43, 48
Correct.
minutes every night. Like Pascal was a rock, and he was also proven winner, lineage, defense, and the Pacers are seeing it now. Like, but even the Pacers are like, I mean, he's a good player. Is he a max guy? They're going to have to pay him.
And he's probably not at the age that he is, and that's fine. But there is a discussion around Ingram that's important. I know I'll be called a nerd or whatever, but you have to think about what his contract's going to be. You just do. I get that he's a good player. He's really good, but like you're trading. It's honestly, when they traded for DeJounte with 2 years left, it was like, all right, you got 2 years to make this decision. He was cheap then, ended up paying him. By the way, ended up signing a good contract that was very favorable for the Hawks in the end.
And that's another thing where DeJounte is on a value contract, on a better contract.
And he also had an artificially limited ability to sign. So it actually worked out really well for the Hawks that they could go to DeJounte and be like, DeJounte, we are literally not allowed to offer you more than this number. This is this is the max we can offer you. And they were able to just put that on the table. And DeJounte could say yes or no. He said yes, worked out good for the Hawks. With Ingram, no such thing. He's already on a mini max contract right now, we'll say $35-ish million. And if he can sign for $50 million a year, basically at the end, not that many, but it's in the 40s. And I don't know if I'd be in a hurry. And look, the Pelicans could have already given that contract, and they didn't do it. So the Pelicans are similar to the Hawks in that they also have a tax aversion in New Orleans. They don't like to pay the tax. Yep. So do the Hawks. Doesn't mean they won't ever, just to give the caveat, but they haven't paid it yet. And if you have where the Hawks are salary wise, you got to be prepared to do this. It's part of the organizational plan thing. You got to be ready.
And that's where I'm like, trade puts like, okay, Ingram is gettable without even having to, like, to me, you can get Ingram without having to get up the number one overall pick.
Oh, definitely, yes.
You know, could be just
DeJounte and whatever else.
DeJounte, yes. Now the whatever else is important.
Well, and also just to say it, Ingram and DeJounte make different salaries, so it can't just be one for one. You have to put more money in the deal to get it done. And then how you do that, whether it's, the structure that was out there around in February with New Orleans was that the Hawks wanted to send DeJounte and Clint.
Yep.
And the Pelicans wanted DeJounte and Onyeka.
And the Hawks wager.
And the Hawks said no, which is understandable.
For CJ McCollum, I need people.
Well, yeah, there was a McCollum. There was a McCollum deal. There was another weird.
It was McCollum and picks or something. But
just to say this out loud, the Pelicans, I don't think are going to trade Trey Murphy, and Herb Jones may be kind of gettable, but I don't think Murphy is. And I think it's more like, again, I'm hypothetical but informed. I think you're talking about like DeJounte and Onyeka for Ingram and Dyson Daniels.
Yep.
Something like that. I'm not saying that's exactly what it would be, but like ish.
That's
in that range.
If to me, if a deal is going to go down between those two teams, because there is something interesting going on in the league. Like the Pelicans don't need draft picks; they need players.
And they also want a center that's not a big stiff, which is why Okongwu appeals to them, because with Zion they don't want Clint's skill set. I mean, they obviously Clint's better than Valanciunas. But it's that similar thing where they don't want someone getting in Zion's way. And at least with Onyeka, you got more floor game. He's not perfect for Zion, but he's better for Zion than what they have now. And he's young and cheap.
Exactly. Young, cheap, has real upside, hasn't gotten a real chance to start. But like to me, I'm like the number one pick. Before the Hawks got the number one pick, I would look at that deal and be like, no, I'm not interested in Ingram. Like he doesn't play enough. There's some questions about his defense, et cetera, et cetera. Now that they do, and Alex Sarr is the number, like Alex Sarr is the knock. There's no consensus. Oh, the Hawks got
we got to talk
Alex
about
Sarr is the number one guy.
Yeah,
I can understand. Like on ATL 29, last time me, Glenn, and Kevin potted, I talked about how I like the pairing of Okongwu and Sarr. However, to me, the most important thing, if the Hawks want to be title contenders, Trae Young has to be on the team. Unless they get a like talent for Trae Young in a trade, which that never happens. Nobody trades like for talent in this league.
I'll say this
except for potentially DeJounte for Brandon Ingram. That might be a like trade.
But if they trade, and it's a big if they were to trade Trae, I have a feeling that you and I wouldn't like it, but put that to the side. If they trade Trae, it will be for pieces plural. It will not be for like talent. And to your point, that makes it harder. And I think a certain age, maybe, or experience level of Hawks fan remembers the 25 years plus between Dominique and Trae. And you know this. There were a lot of good Hawks teams in that run. A lot. And yet there was still a decent segment of the fan base that was never going to care until they got a star, a famous person. Not even like you know what I mean? You could argue, I'm not arguing this right now. You could argue that Trey is not that much better than some of the guys they had in this range. Now, I wouldn't make that argument. You could argue that. Like prime Al Horford or prime Joe Johnson. How do you want to put that? The gap there may not be as big, but the fame level, the dynamism level, the number one option level is significantly different. And for basketball fans, especially, basketball fans like stars. They just do.
Trae Young is a superstar in the way that Joe Johnson and Al Horford would never be, just because of his ability to score the ball.
And Joe Johnson made 7 All-Star teams. 7.
Yeah.
7.
Yeah, no. So it's like, but if the Hawks were to trade, like to me, I see a pathway to contention with Trae Young and whatever they do with this number 1 overall pick and Jalen Johnson. Like there is a pathway, and like Alex Sarr, I've done some little film watching.
No, I was gonna say let's do it. Make sure we get to this now, because you're gonna come back. We got to talk about Alex Sarr. We got to talk about him.
Alex Sarr. I don't know about his offensive game. There's some flashes of some good stuff. There's some, like, you see little breadcrumbs of being able to bring the ball up the floor, being able to shoot, being able to create for himself, finishes at the rim strong, like et cetera, et cetera. But his defense is good. And I think his defense is going to be good day one. Notwithstanding, like I think there's a real chance I think he's in the same category of player in the sense of what I think he's actually more advanced than what Jaren was as a rookie. I think he's closer to what, at least defensively, because Jaren just fouled all the time. Like he's closer to like Evan Mobley, what Chet Holmgren brought defensively. I'm not saying he's going to have that same impact that Chet did. That what Chet's done for OKC is special. What Evan Mobley did for Cleveland, but Evan Mobley had Jared Allen behind him.
Yeah,
Chet did it by himself. That Chet had one of the most underrated rookie seasons in NBA history.
And Chet is a true unicorn too. Like he's actually the guy who actually can hold up at center and shoot and protect the rim. He's the guy that like everyone on the internet dreams about as far as your like flexible center. Anyway,
but Alex Sarr defensively, full stop. He's a better athlete than all these dudes. Like a lot of Sam Fazzini said this, and I'm watching him. This man is quick. He's fast. He's
also the tallest of all of them.
He's
legitimate. So he measured the common measurements happened this week before we're talking. He measured at what he measured 7'1". He's legitimately 7'1". Now 7'4" wingspan is big. It's not like incredible for a guy who's 7'1", but that's really long still. That's center size. I know our guy Andrew Kelly said this, and I'll put it out there too. One of those NBA draft comparison models that does measurements. Sarr's most similar physical measurement profile is Tyson Chandler, who was a full-time center and was an anchor defender, became all defense. Like I know he kind of it took him a while, but he was a center in capital letters, and at the same physical size. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors, and passion, drive, and patience are the formula for winning championships. That's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up as well to peak performance. They have roof racks, they have superchargers, they have exhaust kits, LED headlights, and much, much more. Whether you're actually into power or speed or style, eBay Motors has got you covered across the board for your vehicle. They have over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for with the folks at eBay Motors. And they have eBay's guaranteed fit, which means your part is guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money is coming back to you. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and you are never, never, never burning any cash. With all the parts that you need, the price that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win that you are seeking. Keep your ride or die alive right now at ebaymotors.com. One more time, the place to go and visit is ebaymotors.com. eBay guaranteed fits only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
The thing that Alex Sarr potentially brings to the Hawks is what if Clint Capella was 19 years old
and 3 inches taller.
3 inches taller, more skilled, and an even better athlete than Clint Capella. Prime Clint Capella.
I was gonna say young
Clint Capella, who was legitimately like on a lot of the stuff that rates, players like the advanced metrics rating him as a consistent top 20 player in the league. Like,
and very similar profiles in some ways too, especially young Clint. Now, Clint, as you would hope Sarr will do, Clint learned the dark arts of playing center in the NBA, and Clint became incredibly good at that. And you can't assume that everyone's going to do that, which is a big caveat, because some of the stuff that Sarr doesn't do right now, and I'm not trying to nitpick him, is that he doesn't rebound yet. He's not a great screen setter yet. Like the stuff that you got to, if you're going to play 5 full time, which he may not do, I don't know. He'll have to learn that stuff.
The defensive rebounding, that's probably my biggest concern. The screen setting can be taught. Like, I think that
I agree.
Playing next to a Trae, if he plays next to a Trae Young in a Quinn system, he's going to learn how to set screens.
I think the only I shouldn't say this. I think the major or almost only defensive concern I have is rebounding. I think everything else I see on film with him defensively is like what you would want to see. Now, it's tiny samples. Like it's a weird situation. He's playing the NBL. He was an overtime elite before that. There's a lot of film on Alex Sarr, but it's not like conventional film.
Yeah, it's so funny. I think, like, to me, I actually wanted to bring this up to you. I actually feel this. Like, if Sarr, Buzelis, and Holland just would have went to college, they're probably the consistent top 3 picks, and we're not calling
they might have been. And
we're not. I don't know if we have time to talk about.
No, we'll save everybody else in the draft because we're gonna have to. But yeah,
Buzelis and Holland, but like G League United was a mess this season. Like that was.
By the way, they've disbanded since then. So
yeah, but that was awful for them as players, truly, in the sense that they have a lot of bad film. But if you watch them on a possession basis, and if you watch what they do physically, like those two guys, like they look like potential. I don't know. I wouldn't say superstars, but like complimentary. Like potentially be the second or third best player on a championship team. Like I think especially they have that upside. Absolutely.
Holland's got the tool. I mean, I'm not trying to appeal to authority, but like, it doesn't mean he's right, but John Hollinger does the work, and John has Ron Holland number 1. And like, that's a reasonable thing to have. I think some of that's profile, like people that don't value bigs a lot, which is, I'm kind of in that to some degree. Holland's if it works, and that's a big if, he's the 6'7" monster physical wing everybody wants. So like, if you're just betting on upside, it wouldn't be hard to argue he has the highest upside in the class because just physically.
It's wild because I've done it. The more I watch Holland, I see what the other guys what everybody else was saying.
Brian made Jimmy Butler comps on the show 3 days ago. As people were listening to this, and like Jimmy was a weird case because like he was the 30th pick in the draft out of Marquette. Like it was a really, really slow development, but Jimmy has the physical tools. Like Jimmy Butler, especially younger Jimmy Butler, 6'7", beast physically. He used to be a really good athlete. Now he's not that good of an athlete anymore, but like Chicago Butler was a fantastic athlete. The stuff he didn't have was the offense, and he figured it out. Now, Kawhi did the same thing. I'm not saying Ron Holland's not Kawhi physically, because Kawhi physically was ridiculous, but like no one at San Diego State thought Kawhi was going to become Kawhi on offense. The fact that Kawhi became this like super polished jump shooting scorer was insane if you watched him in college. But like that's why you bet on two-way wings, because they could find it. I'm not saying they're gonna, but they could.
Well, the thing is, those two-way wings have to have like a elite trait somewhere. Kawhi had his rebounding. Like he was the best rebounder in college.
And the biggest hands I've ever seen in my life, I think, Kawhi. Yeah, Kawhi has hands that are like twice the size of mine.
What people didn't realize is he had insane work ethic too. So
that's the book. Like, speaking of that, Ron Holland's got the book on that. He's apparently
I don't want to rule out somebody like Ron or Buzelis as well, who like I watched the G League game he had against the College Skyhawks. Yeah, and that was as impressive a 15 point per game point performance I've seen out of a prospect.
You messaged me that night. You're like, I'm in on Madhouse. I was like, okay.
I'm like, yo, this like completely shut what a lot of guys want to do on offense. Like, I was like, I'm watching. I'm like, man, because I was impressed by how well Veet had been playing in the G League. I was like, all right, does Veet have something? And like Veet played well that game. I'm like, Mattaz is like, he's basically the G League's point guard. He's been bigger Veet, but he also blocks shots at the rim. I'm like, this is intriguing here. And you do more and you see the growth that he's had. He's gotten a lot bigger, gotten stronger, and all that good stuff. But I'm just saying, like, to me, if those two guys like if Alex Sarr goes to Kentucky, he dominates defensively. He's probably going to get a bunch of lob dunks, and people are going to compare him to Anthony Davis, and he's going to go number one. And nobody like we're not having this conversation. But he went the different route. And not to say it's better or worse, but I do think it's one of those things where, like, to me, I think it's one of those things where you see him physically, and then you see the tools that he has, and you're like, yeah, he's the guy. Like,
I do wonder, to your point, even before this decision to go to Australia, him going to OTE for 2 years. And while they play a lot, and it's weird because I won't go into the whole overtime elite thing, but they play a ton of basketball, and it's broadcast on overtime, but like it's not the normal development track people go through. Like you're not playing EYBL like he would have been playing. You're not doing like the normal stuff. And also, he's not.
I mean, for him, he's not from America. He's from France. He was playing.
So it's a very weird track that he took to go to America, to overtime elite, and then to Australia, and now. So yeah, we don't have to belabor the point, but it sounds like again, it's May 14th. I keep saying this as we're recording this on Tuesday. I keep saying if the draft's today, I'm taking Alex Sarr. I am. I can change that maybe.
And it goes to the original point where I'm comparing him to Mobley, Chet.
Yeah.
Chet I think had a case to go number one, but like
I had Chet number one class.
Like Jaren Jackson, you probably wouldn't draft number one overall, but for the Hawks, the Hawks could absolutely use a Jaren Jackson on this.
Well, and to be fair, if Jaren from 2018, who had his own questions, like he didn't play a ton at Michigan State as a freshman, it was a weird situation for him to. Yeah. If he's in this class, he's in the mix for number one. At that point, he wasn't. This class is weaker. There's no Luka. There's no Trey. I mean, Ayton, for as much as I don't love him now, was considered a consensus top 2 or 3 guy in that class. Marvin Bagley happened. So anyway, it was a weird draft. But anyway,
we have, funny enough, Brad, I hate bringing it up. We have a whole podcast of us talking about that draft.
Oh my God. I'm sure I was right about one thing is I had Luka number one the entire class, and that was correct. I have to say, sorry to Hawks fans.
Brad, I was saying like he was James Harden. He's just going to be James Harden in the NBA. Like I was like, this is the MVP. Like, no doubter. We don't want to bring it up.
No, it doesn't matter. But I was wrong on Trey. I was too low.
I didn't think the Hawks were going to take Trey. Then I watched Trey. And I was like, okay, I get it. It was one of those things where it's like they picked him. Then I'm like, all right, why would they do this? Not because it was. And then I was like, man, Trey dominated at Oklahoma. Like,
no, he did.
He just did.
My opinion of Trey was basically, I saw the upside. I thought the risk was considerable, and we'll never know. I mean, obviously, just because of the size, and it worked. And most guys' size don't work. It just worked because Trae Young is really, 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 really good. And
I think a lot of people underestimate is just how physically strong Trae Young is.
I definitely agree.
Pound for pound, one of the strongest players in the NBA, and he's able to hold his position in ways you wouldn't expect somebody of his frame to be able to do, in the ways that DeJounte Murray just physically can't.
Well, and most guys can't. I mean, that'll be a talking point with not that we'll do it. We won't do it now, but Rob Dillingham is going to get a lot of this, and Rob Dillingham is about smaller than Trey was coming out of college, like considerably smaller. And there's going to be, as we talked about many times before, the last few years, the NBA has basically shunned small guards, even guys who were like proven really good college players like Kenny Chandler. Remember him? He was a guy who fell pretty far in the draft, and it was out of the league in like a year.
If you're not a good shooter, who the Hawks take from Keegan? Why am I Sharif Cooper?
Oh, Sharif Cooper. Yeah, same thing.
Cooper has, Cooper Cooper had all the traits except for one thing: he can't shoot.
And there's I guess it'll be easier for us this year because I don't want to say 0%. It's very unlikely the Hawks take one of the small guards at number one, just for roster reasons. So that should be a little bit easier for us to talk about. But no, I mean, I'll have you come back. Hopefully you'll be willing. And we'll do like a full-on draft episode where we can kind of talk about all the other guys. Because it's interesting. And with Brian, I kind of wanted to cast the net wide. We talked about like 10 guys. On the mailbag show, which was the last show before this, I was like, because I keep getting yelled at, like, no, it's just simple. It's just Sarr. I'm like, okay, I'm not saying it's not Sarr. I'm saying it's the middle of May, and we don't know that the Hawks love Sarr. That's all. That's my whole point. We just don't. I'm not going to do a month of shows assuming they're going to take Sarr because I just don't know that yet. If I get intel in a couple of weeks that, hey, they're going to take Sarr, I will shift even more to Sarr because that's going to be the reality. But they could take Ron Holland. I wouldn't fall on the floor. Like I would take Sarr if it was me. But to me, if it's early,
not to say like everything has to be through Trae Young. Like they have to make their decision separate from Trae. But like to me,
yeah,
the Trae Sarr pairing, like just
it makes a ton of sense.
A big with like Capella's physical, frame, wingspan, length, better hands, but also can catch the basketball and has skill and can dribble and shoot. His offensive ceiling is of a number one guy. He hasn't shown it, but he has the traits of a number one guy on offense.
I think it's more likely to be a number 2 or 3 offensively, just because of how many
bigs.
I'm not saying it's
bigs,
right? No, that's what I was about to say. Like there are essentially 2 bigs in the league that can do that, and people might argue for Sabonis or some of the other. And I get it. Those
three
are
if you count Giannis. 3 if you count.
Yeah, and Giannis is more. I am not comping Sarr to Giannis, but that is probably the clearer path for Sarr to become a number 1 pick. Would be more of a Giannis path because Embiid and Jokic are true back to the basket centers. Sarr isn't going to be that. He's not as big as those guys, physically thick and all that stuff as those guys. It's more of that. Again, I'm not saying to be honest, but I think it's more likely that he becomes like a number 2 on offense, which by the way, if he's as good as he could be on defense, no one's going to care if he's a number 2 on offense.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So anyway, I'm not trying to gas up Alex Sarr too much. People are doing that for me in mid-May, but I like him. I know you do too. We'll circle back on that. We covered a lot of ground in an hour. It's a big summer. We said that before. We should emphasize that again. It's a massive summer. It's
the biggest summer in Hawks franchise history. Like,
you said that before we started recording. I don't know if it is, but I'm actually going to look and see if I can find one bigger. If that makes sense. But
unless you want to count the Pete Babcock, playoff guarantee.
I have the shirt somewhere in my house.
That was huge, but people kind of understood that team wasn't going to be good. But
not the marketing department. They didn't know. Maybe they did know. They just tried to take the loss. Anyway, before you continue to cough yourself off this podcast,
I'm dying.
I'm just giving you grief. I won't make you do the anime pick if you're going to be unable to speak. If you're able to talk, we'll do it. But if not, that's okay.
Anime.
I know you got something deep in the woods.
I have something deep in my throat. I don't know what's going on. By the way, I'm fine.
You're good. You're talking a lot. It's fine.
Dying. But anime. Even though I haven't watched the new season, Konosuba is back, so I will be watching it. It's hilarious. Kaiju number 8 is really impressing me. Like it stars a 32-year-old. Like in anime, that's crazy. Like the main character.
I'll take your word for it.
32-year-old, like So if you're a millennial, it's kind of somewhat relatable, but it's kind of a superhero show, but it's really good. I'm thoroughly enjoying that. But there are other stuff. I'm reading Jujutsu Kaisen chapter, so I know what's happened post what's going on in the anime. It's been incredible. Chainsaw Man as well, same thing. So the basics, but I don't have much for you newer for you guys, unfortunately. Other than I guess Kaiju number 8. Like if you're not watching that, you should be watching.
There you go. A recommendation. We got it in under the wire, and we'll call it there. But thank you, my friend, for being here. We will do it again at least one more time before the draft, maybe twice. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what we got. And you can be found regularly on ATL on 29, right? You, Glenn
absolutely
Willis,
regularly. Yep. I'm back regularly podcasting, so check us out.
That's the place to go. Thank you for being here. As always, please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you might find podcasts. This is probably it for the week, but I'll have something. If something breaks, I'll always be here. And if not, we'll have plenty more coming up next week. So subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, and we'll see you all next time.